So I finally bit the bullet and I bought two 100-watt solar panels and a charge controller. Then, when the day they arrived, it started raining. Didn't stop raining for like 4 or 5 days. And it's not even like full rain, it's just like barely pissing. And it's not, the weather forecast didn't even show rain, but it's been raining constantly. Well, finally the rain stopped, so let's open up my package. I wonder what's in here. Look at that. And over here I got this. This is a cheap pulse width modulation charge controller. It'll just get me by for the time being. Then I have plans to modify it. It has a LCD display. That's kind of what got me, because I could have only spent like $8 and gotten a really cheap one, but I thought to spend $30 so I could actually have a readout, because I'd much rather spend $30 than having to wire up a bunch of meters and stuff. With this, I can just press the button and see what all the readings are. Now let's open up this thing. So let's see, here's the details for these. 100 watts apiece, 18.9 volts, 5.29 amps. Now, of course, I'm not going to get full power from these unless I use MPPT or maximum power point tracking. I can't remember what it's called. This pulse width modulator will probably only give me about, I'd say probably 75 watts from each panel at most, but I have plans to fix that, and also I can use this later on. Now you see, I'm planning to build my own MPPT transformer. It's not going to be a charge controller, because all it'll do is it will convert the voltage. It won't worry about charging the batteries. It'll take the 18 volts from these panels and step it down to like 13.5 or 14 volts or so. Then I'll have that power coming into this PWM, pulse width modulation controller. And this pulse width modulation controller will just turn it on and off to charge the batteries. You see, how PWM works is you have the battery, and it basically just keeps connecting the solar panels to it to keep the voltage up. Now, of course, if the battery's dead, it just holds it on there. It just keeps it connected, so it charges it up. But whenever the voltage starts getting too high, it pulls it off so the voltage doesn't get too high on the battery. So what I'm wanting to do is I'm going to modify this later on. So instead of turning it on and off, it'll switch. So whenever it starts getting near the full of the battery, it'll start switching over to an electrolysis tank, which will start producing hydrogen and oxygen. And then the hydrogen and oxygen will fill up these big, like, thick balloon mechanisms. And once they get so big, I will have refrigerator compressors, which will compress the hydrogen and oxygen into my oxyacetylene tanks. And then what I can do is I can use the hydrogen for, well, I can use a blowtorch. I can use an oxyacetylene torch finally. I can use it to run my lawnmower, because now I'm running my lawnmower off propane, so I can switch it over to hydrogen then. And now if I do that, I'll probably have a lot more uses for hydrogen. Actually, wait, no, I put hydrogen in that one. Okay, so I probably have a lot more uses for hydrogen than I would for oxygen. So that means that I'd end up with a lot extra oxygen. Or, actually, no, you get twice as much hydrogen from water. Never mind. Well, if I end up with any extra gas, what I can do is I can release it to make, like, dry ice or something. I can make an apparatus to where releasing it will make the gas expand from the 600 psi or whatever down to 14 psi, which is our atmospheric pressure. And it will super cool down to like maybe minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And I can do super cold stuff. That'd be pretty cool. Well, anyway, let's test these solar panels. Let's rig up a first battery system to see if we can get something to work. So they are, I think it's 36 cells in here. Here's the back. It's actually almost see-through. Now this is very thin right here, this material. I believe it's like a glass. Yeah, I can't really tell if it's a glass or a plastic. It feels like, if it is a plastic, it's a very hard plastic, but it doesn't feel very flexible. So it has the properties of glass, where if you were to hit this, it'd probably fracture. But it seems very strong. Then it probably has the solar cells glued to the backside. This is probably epoxy all in here. And then it has this layer on the back, which is like a plasticky material. The plasticky material back here doesn't seem very thick. So if something were to go wrong on this solar panel, I probably could scrape away this plastic, and then I could have access to each of the solar panels or solar cells. So if one of the solar cells got broken and no longer connected, I could always scratch away and solder it and cross it over, so all the other ones would still be accessible. I just would take out that one. So that's very interesting. Gonna have plenty of stuff to do with this. I almost forgot that these connectors in the back are very weird. I totally didn't really think about the connectors. I'll probably just like jam a nail or something into there, and I can have jumper cables going along. Because I don't want to cut these off. That'd be stupid, because these are already really nice connectors. I just don't have other connectors. So for the time being, I'll just rig something up to be connected to that. And then I can always use the cables that are meant to go with this later on. Aw, look at them. Aren't they so cool? Okie dokie. So one of the panels is at 21.6 volts, and that's pretty good. Of course, I'll have to pull that down in order to pull any good amps from it, but I'll pull it down to like 18 volts or so. Now, one interesting thing is that these connectors will easily allow these to connect up in series. I could just connect them up in series. That'd be pretty nice. Don't know for sure if my charge controller will handle it, though. Let's see. Don't think so. But also, if I did that, though, it would pull each panel down to 6 volts. And so I'd only be getting 6 volts at 5 amps. So it would actually be, it wouldn't be very good, because the big issue with solar panels is once you bring them down, like these panels, if you bring them down below 18 volts, the amperage doesn't increase. You just keep getting less volts. So you can get 18 volts 5 amps, or you can go at 12 volts 5 amps. But you're still getting the same amps, so you're actually getting a lot less power. That's why with the PWM charger, if you connect it up, you're actually pulling the system down to 12 volts, or actually 13 or 13.5 or whatever volts. So you could be pulling 17 volts at 5 amps and getting 100 watts, but instead you're getting 13 volts at 5 amps and getting like 75 watts. So an MPPT controller would actually transform that, so you'd actually be taking 17 volts 5 amps, or 18 volts 5 amps from the solar panels, but you'd be converting that to 12 volts, or to 13 volts, like 7 amps. So you'd be getting your full amount of power, if that makes sense. Well, anyway, so we have the charger here. I've been going through a lot of my batteries here recently and charging them up. All these ones are charged, so we'll get one charged one to see how that does. We'll see if the MPP, or the PWM function works okay. But then over here I have a lot of batteries that I haven't charged in a while. A lot of these are probably down to like 12.1 volts or so. So this will be a good estimate to see how it'll handle a fully dead battery. So as it turns out, this battery isn't nearly dead as I thought it was. It's at 12.54 volts. So that's kind of like medium discharge. That's probably lower than I'd ever discharge my batteries if I had them all connected up as one big battery bank. This one's at 12.89 volts. That's been sitting at that voltage for like a week and a half, so that's a pretty good battery. And that one's at 6 volts, so that's more than dead. So I think we'll start with this one, and we'll see how the charge controller and the solar panel handles a moderately discharged battery. Then we'll see a fully discharged, actually more than fully discharged battery, and then we'll see how it does with a full battery. I've taken some screws and some nails and connected up into here so I can have access to the electricity. And I'm getting some cables and stuff cut together for the connectors. Cat? I'm trying to film here. That's not the right connector for the battery. Am I blind? That's more like it. This will be going to the battery and we'll have some more wires coming out to the solar panels. And here we have the solar panel leads. I'm really not sure if this charger runs off the battery or if it runs off the panel, so let's connect it up. Looks like it runs off the battery. 12.4 volts. Nice. Bulk, okay. So I read the manual, and there's pretty much not much I can really change on this. But not much I really have to change. It's pretty simple. Works the way it wants. It's just that it has a different cutoff voltages that it can turn off access to the load whenever the voltage is too low or whatever. So that's pretty handy. Unfortunately, the solar panel is pretty much in darkness right now. As much as I enjoy having trees for shade, the shade isn't very good. Whoa, fall's already setting in. Wow. Anyway, having this much shade isn't very good for the solar panels. So let's move them over to the extra yard over there and see if we can get more power. So here we are with plenty of sunshine and the pretty dead battery. Let's plug up the battery. Seems like this thing can run off pretty low voltage. 5.3 volts. Okay. Now let's plug up the solar panel. There's 16.1 volts from the solar panel. It's charging at 3.3 amps. The battery is at 13 volts and it's bulk charging. So the battery's raising in voltage pretty fast. That's because it's not very conductive. We'll have to wait for this battery to gain some conductivity so it can start charging again. Last time I checked this battery, it had 25 amp hours, about a quarter of its capacity, and it usually stayed around 12.2 volts. Wow, this is coming along pretty fast. So for the first like 5 minutes or so, it was bulk charging until it hit 13.0 volts. And then it switched over to float charging, where it was only giving about 2 amps into the battery. But now the conductivity of the battery has gone up a bit, so let's switch back to bulk. And the voltage, it's starting to pull more amps, so the voltage is going down. Let's see. Or maybe that's just the sunlight's fading, don't know. Either way, looks pretty good. I'm quite happy with this purchase. I think this will be able to help me do a lot of experiments. Each one of these panels cost me $130 from eBay, and they came from only a couple thousand miles away here in the United States. I didn't have to wait a month for them to come from China, so that's pretty good. They only took like 4 days to come in. Now, the shadow really does creep up on there pretty quickly. What I wanted to do is I'm wanting to take a big pole, kind of like this pole up here. This is a decorative thing my mom made. It's supposed to be like something from World of Warcraft. I don't know. She plays World of Warcraft, I don't. But I'm going to buy one of these poles, probably longer, and I'll put it into the ground over here. probably around here or so. And then I'll have it come up about, I'd say maybe, well, as high as I can get it. Hopefully above those bushes, so maybe about 15 feet or so. So then we'll have the pole going up, and I'll have like a little, like beams going across or something. I'm still figuring it out. But either way, at first I'll have the solar panels up high, so they can take advantage of being outside of a lot of the shadows. Because even being up like 10 feet or so would make the shadows have to be like 15 feet over there, or 10 feet over there, or whatever, before the shadows hit the solar panel. And then I might have a battery box down here with all my batteries, or I might have a cable running to a battery box somewhere else. I'm not sure about that, because I would hate to lose power on a long cable. I can get to that some other time, though. But for now, what I'm going to be doing, the next step of this is going to be making the thing to set the solar panels up, and they'll be fixed. So they won't be solar tracking yet, but then I will make it to where I can always add that feature later, so where it'll be a swivel mechanism, and I can have a sun tracking motor type mechanism, and that should increase power even more. But yeah, this is pretty cool. These are pretty sturdy too. Pretty happy with that. I may actually just buy some long cabling for this, because I'm thinking it's probably waterproof, because it has little O-rings in there. So I'll probably just buy some more cable of this, like a couple strands of 100 foot of this, and maybe a splicer so I can put 2 lines into one cable. And then, because if I had a cable that thick, which is, let's see, it's rated for 600 volts, 12 gauge, 12 gauge, well I can get thicker wire than that. I'll just get like anywhere from 14 gauge to 10 gauge wire and run it to my shed. I'll probably have a battery box next to my shed. Or I might have it over here to save space. Yeah, it might be better to put it over here. A while back I got these power cables out of a dumpster. It's about 150 feet of, I think, 14 gauge wire. Now, these each have 3 strands in it. And they're not really good for AC use because they're all kind of eaten up and they're old. But I think for DC use they'd be okay, because I don't really care if I lose a little bit of power. I tested the resistance of this extension cord, and the resistance from pole to pole, or connector to connector for each wire, is about 0.2 ohms. And that fits the 14 gauge copper wire thing, because spec, or whatever you call it, because I think it's for 14 gauge wire, for every 1,000 feet of it you have, that will have like 2.4 ohms. Well, this is 0.24 ohms, and this is 100 feet, 1/10 of that, so that fits nicely. I think that means there will be, if I use this to provide 12 volts at like 6 or 12 amps or whatever, I'll be losing about 4% of the power. Now, the thing is, though, I can double this up. So I'm thinking if I double it up, maybe that would mean that I would have like half as much power loss, so maybe like 2%. I don't know though. Maybe you have to multiply it by the square. So maybe I'd have to have like twice as much, and then 4 times as much to get that. I don't know. But that one big spool of cable would have enough length to go from the tower to there and back again twice. Now it has 3 strands, so I'd actually have 6 wires going. So that would mean I'd actually have 3 wires, 3 14 gauge wires for every strand. Or if I add both of these wires together, I would have enough length to go from there to here and back. We're giving 6 wires, 3 for positive, 3 for negative, and I could have the batteries back here. Or I could just add them together and have like 3 or 4 times back and forth. That'd be quite a bit of power. Well, quite a bit of copper. Because I just bury it. I wouldn't really care if those power lines are bad. Oh well. I'm pretty sure they have cracks and stuff in them, but I don't really care. I can always upgrade it later. Now as for the battery box, I'm thinking I'll have a very narrow, long battery box with 2 metal poles going underneath like the roof of it. And I'll have like doors on the side so I can get to it. Now each one of these metal poles will be positive and negative. So then what I'll do is I'll have a bunch of jumpers that I'll make. They'll just be 14 gauge or thicker wire with these Mueller clips on the end. And one of them will have a fuse in between it. So what I'd do is I would have the long like box. I'd open the door, I'd put a battery in, and then when I'm inside of it, I would take a jumper and I would hook the negative of the battery to the negative rod that's going up. And then the positive one, I would get one of these that has a fuse on it. So I'd have positive with a like a 30 amp automotive fuse. Go to the positive. And then all the batteries, I do the same thing to all of them. So all the positive leads would have fuses on them. All the negatives would just be straight to the negative rod. And then I probably use like a copper rod because they're probably good, better than steel. And then at the end of the box, I'll have like another like waterproof box because all the batteries, they can get wet. They've been out here for a long time. But the other box will have the charge controllers and stuff. And so out of the charge controller, I'll have a wire coming out, and I'll have it clicking on to the positive pipe and the negative pipe. And then we can have that going into the charge controller. I'm going to have like power coming out for the solar panels and stuff. And I'm thinking that's pretty much it. I think that would probably be a pretty good start. And then I could always add it to where it has like 2 layers of car batteries, but I'm thinking all my car batteries could probably sit end to end. Well, not like end to end, but side to side in like probably 10 feet. And 10 feet would be easily, I could easily make a 10-foot roof out of tin roofing. Just make sure it doesn't look like crap, because all the tin roofing I have is crap. I might invest like $30 to get a new like 12-foot section with like because a lot of the newer metal roofing has like a nice little like green plastic coating over it so it doesn't rust. So I might just invest a little bit to make it look nice. And digging the hole for the tower won't be very hard at all. I have an auger that I can just auger a little hole down, and yeah, it takes like what, a half hour to auger it by hand. Because right now the big issue I have is shadow, as you can see. Yeah, the battery's at 12.1 volts. That's actually not that bad because it's been charging for only like a half hour or so. Pretty awesome. Oh, and by the way, even though this is in shadow, it still is giving power. Here's the battery voltage. There's the photovoltaic voltage. Oh, whoops. I always forget C is amps. I should just say A. 0.4, 0.5 amps. So that's like 4 to 7 watts. That's not that bad. That's just enough to slowly trickle charge that battery, at least for the time being, because of course even the sun will go down after a little bit. It is a real shame that this tree is there. Well, other than the fact that I like the shade. But if it wasn't there, I could have the solar panels up on my house. Because that'd be really cool to make like a walkway on the top of my house and have like an observatory with a big telescope. And yeah, my mom probably wouldn't want that because the house is kind of old and rickety, but oh well. It would be interesting to do though. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and thanks for watching. See ya!